So the last thing that I want to talk about today is some more project ideas. And we have two sort of categories that we're talking about for a non-Kerbal robot. Either we're going to do pure gazebo sim, or we're going to do something with a physical robot. And the way the project assignment is described, most physical robot projects should involve a gazebo sim. Working in simulation is really nice. If you break the robot in sim, it costs you $0. If you break the physical robot kit, then it's broken and either you have to buy a new one or you're down one on the team. It's no fun. It's worth some effort to get a sim working. So if you're doing a pure simulation thing, one really interesting idea is to consider the question of alternate motion. So we've been working with wheeled robots in Gazebo so far because that's what the sort of common case is and that's what the robot kit does. But what if you do a flying robot? Maybe one that's a quad rotor? Like the drones that everybody likes doing? Maybe you want to write a plugin that lets you simulate flapping wings. That might be fun. Another option would be a legged robot. Just simply doing motion planning for a 6 or 8-legged robot would be a good portion of a project all by itself. If you want to, or less motion planning, sort of motion planning for movement, so you can do local movement and obstacle avoidance. That's an interesting thing to work on. So whatever you're doing for motion, there's a bunch of stuff that you can try to do. So one really obvious thing to do would be to solve a maze with SLAM. So we don't provide the robot with any sort of localization information at all. We're even worse than the homework where we're trying to do maze solving just based on finding corners and solving a maze with SLAM, or some subset of that. Maybe we have a perfectly accurate compass, or we have sort of a really inaccurate GPS sort of thing that we're combining with other sensors using a Kalman filter, and then this is all going on with a legged robot. That might be fun. Another thing that we could do that would be sort of amusing is an idea of destructive pathfinding. What if we knock over walls? Gazebo has a physics simulation. We can knock things all around. That might be neat to deal with. You're certainly allowed to do a robot arm thing if you want. I don't necessarily recommend it. We haven't covered any of the concepts for that, but it's possible in Gazebo. So those are some ideas with Gazebo. What can we do with a physical robot? So there's a bunch of stuff that we can do in mapping and navigation. And one question that we need to deal with the physical robot is, how is the control program going to happen? Because the physical robot kit is a Arduino. An Arduino has a couple K of RAM. It can't really do, it can't do much. With that little RAM, there's not a ton, mapping even ends up being hard because you don't have enough space for the map in the memory. So we could Bluetooth to a computer and run our control program remotely from the computer, and that'll let us do a bunch of stuff. We could attach a phone. And we could then directly cable it to the robot. Communication there is easy. One of the complications with Bluetoothing to a computer is that I haven't gotten that to work yet. I didn't spend that long fighting with it. It should work. It works in their sample software, but in the hour I spent on it, I couldn't get it to work. attaching a phone to the robot with a USB cable. I've gotten a computer talking to the robot over a USB cable. So if you know how to program a phone, then you should be able to do that relatively easily. You could also go sort of computer to phone by Wi-Fi, phone to computer by USB, or some combination like that. So there's a bunch of advantages that I already talked about a little bit to attaching a phone to the robot with a USB cable. We get a bunch of extra sensors on the phone. The phone is a way smarter computer. It's like more of a robot by itself than the robot is. It just doesn't have wheels. And then, of course, are we going to do slam? Totally should do slam. Slam is fun. But there's some other stuff that we could do. We could do simple motion control. Either probably as part of what you're doing, but one of the things that we can do, because we have an accelerometer on the MBot Ranger robot, and we have encoders, is we can do balancing. So you could do a two-wheel balancing robot. Now, I don't think that doing a two-wheel balancing robot by itself is really a sufficiently exciting project for 3 or 4 weeks and 3 or 4 people, but adding a balancing robot into something else that you're doing starts to get a little bit more exciting. And once you have a robot balancing, I almost bet you could get this robot to climb upstairs. And getting the robot to climb upstairs might be a lot of a good project, because that's kind of cool. Alright, so once we hook up a phone, that gives us a lot of options. We could do voice commands. The phone has a microphone on it. We could do a camera. We have a camera. So with a camera, we could follow a human. If we combined voice commands with follow a human, we could tell the robot to heal, and then it would follow us. And then you could have another teammate tell the robot to heal, and it would follow them. It might take a little bit of work to get it to sort of differentiate between people. Maybe you have to like move people around. But you could do something really cool with the combination of voice commands and identifying things. You could do some sort of QR code breadcrumb thing. One of the things that's really easy to do with common computer vision libraries is identifying and read QR codes in your camera view. And so you could have the robot sort of just spin around looking for a QR code. When it finds it, drive towards it. When it gets to a certain distance from it, spin around again looking for a new QR code. And you could have it follow a path just guided by QR codes that way. You probably need a little bit of obstacle avoidance in there. You might need a little bit more complexity to make this super exciting. But, I mean, hooking up the camera integration, getting software development working between the two things, the QR breadcrumbs project starts to be a reasonable project by itself. So another option we can do, if we can Bluetooth or somehow some other way communicate between a remote PC and the thing. Another thing that we could do is point a camera at the robot and use the fact that we're observing the robot through a camera to be able to do localization or some other thing that might be interesting based on computer vision that identifies the robot. And that is a neat idea. All right, while I'm thinking about this, one more interesting idea. If we're in simulation, we could have more than one robot. And if more than one person on your team buys a robot kit, we can do more than one robot here too. So those are just some ideas for what you could conceptually do with a project, which is the information that you need to come up with your project proposal. I'm sure there's a ton of ideas that you could come up with as well. I do recommend thinking about SLAM stuff, and I do recommend looking into how, what did I say? Particle filters work. Particle filters are the coolest thing ever. So yeah, good luck on coming up with your project proposal, and we will have more content next week.